I'm coming back to NCIS in the fall, this Tony DiNozzo. How do I tell people?
I'll see you in the fall.
2 announcements, 2 days. And I honestly think CBS just handed NCIS fans the greatest week this franchise has produced since Gibbs walked out the door in 2021. Because what happened on June 30th was already extraordinary. Mark Harmon returning to NCIS Origins Season 3 for every single episode, working through a present-day mystery tied to his Camp Pendleton days, the original Gibbs back on screen for the first time in a sustained, meaningful way since Season 19. I covered that announcement, and I said then that it was the biggest NCIS news in 5 years. And I meant it. And then July 2nd arrived, and Variety confirmed that Michael Weatherly is returning to NCIS Season 24 as Tony DiNozzo in a season-long arc. And I honestly had to sit down for a minute before I could say anything else. Let's talk about everything. How Tony left, what he has been doing since, what NCIS Tony and Ziva was, why it got canceled, and why that cancellation is the single biggest reason this mothership return makes complete sense right now. What the showrunner just hinted about what Tony might actually be coming back to do on this show. Whether Ziva is walking back through those orange walls with him. What the broader picture looks like for the entire NCIS franchise this fall. And what it means that this same week gave us both Gibbs and Tony on the same franchise at the same time for the first time since both men walked away from the most watched drama on American television. First, Weatherly himself made the confirmation in the most Tony DiNozzo way imaginable. He posted a video to NCIS's official Instagram account, and in classic Tony fashion, he did not give a speech. He did not sit down for a formal announcement. He just looked at the camera, laughing, completely at ease, and said, "I'll see you in the fall." That was it. And I honestly think that video broke the internet before a single news outlet even had time to properly run the story. Because it was so completely him. After 10 years of movie references and impersonations and using humor as the best possible armor against anything that got too close. The man announces his return to television's longest running drama with 6 words and a laugh. Of course he does. Now let's go all the way back to the beginning, because I think you need the full weight of this character's history to understand why this announcement lands the way it does. Tony DiNozzo made his first appearance in the April 2003 backdoor pilot that aired as 2 episodes of Jag. That is 23 years ago. He has been part of this universe longer than most of the current cast has been part of it. He was there for the very first case this team ever worked. He was there for Kate Todd and her death and the grief that followed it. He was there for Jenny Shepard and for Ziva's arrival and for every version of this bullpen that has ever existed. For 13 seasons and over 300 episodes, Tony DiNozzo was the heartbeat of a team that became the most watched drama in the world at its peak. And he did all of it while making you believe he was not trying very hard, which is the greatest acting trick in the world. Because Tony was always trying, he was always watching. He was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room and pretending he had barely noticed the case had started. And then he left. Season 13. The finale titled Family First. And the way he left is the entire reason his return means what it means. He did not get fired. He was not written off as a budget casualty. He was not killed in the field, which, given the way this show has handled certain departures, is notable in itself. He resigned.
You take care of yourself and your family, DiNozzo. Copy that, boss.
Very Special Agent Timothy McGee.
He found out Ziva, the woman he had spent a decade loving in the space between what was said and what was never quite said, had a daughter. His daughter. A little girl named Tali who had just lost her mother to a bomb and had nowhere in the world to go. And Tony Dinozzo, who had spent 13 seasons deflecting everything personal with a movie reference and a grin, looked at that 4-year-old girl and made the only choice that the person he had quietly become could make. He walked away from the job he had given his entire adult life to. He went to Paris. He raised his daughter. And the bullpen was quieter the following week in a way that took this show years to compensate for, and arguably never fully did. He came back once after that, and the circumstances of that return matter too. Season 21. The episode titled The Stories We Leave Behind, which Brian Dietzen co-wrote himself as a tribute to David McCallum and the character of Donald Ducky Mallard. Tony showed up at Ducky's funeral, and watching Weatherly in that scene, the specific quality of the grief on his face, the way his body remembered how to stand in that room, confirmed two things simultaneously. One, that the door was never actually closed on this character. And two, that whatever Weatherly has been doing in the years since he left, he has never stopped knowing exactly who Tony Dinozzo is. That is not a given for an actor returning to a character after nearly a decade. It is genuinely rare. And it was a signal, even if neither the show nor Weatherly was ready to say so out loud at the time, that this was not the last we were going to see of him. And then came NCIS Tony and Ziva, which premiered last fall on Paramount Plus and was the thing this fandom had been asking for since the moment Tony walked out of the building in 2016. The spin-off reunited Weatherly with Cote de Pablo as Ziva David, picking up years after the original series and showing us the life Tony and Ziva had actually built together. Tony in Paris. Ziva alive and present and no longer a ghost haunting the edges of a grief he was not allowed to name out loud. Tali growing up between two parents who had fought their way through an entire decade of almost and finally. The spin-off gave us the resolution the original series had been promising and teasing and almost delivering since season 8 or 9, depending on who you ask. It was the payoff. It was the thing fans had been waiting 10 years for. And then 6 months ago, Paramount Plus canceled it after 1 season. No second season, no movie, no clean goodbye. Just canceled. And the backlash was immediate, and it was loud, and it was the exact kind of fan response that tells a network something important about the size of the audience it just disappointed. And I honestly think the cancellation of Tony and Ziva is the single biggest reason why this mothership return is happening right now. In this form, in this season. Because you cannot give an audience the reunion they have spent a decade wanting and then cancel it before it has a chance to go anywhere without creating a wound that has to be addressed. CBS heard that wound. And CBS has addressed it in the most dramatic possible way by bringing Tony Dinozzo back to the show where he started, where he is most himself, where the people who love him most have always been, for an entire season-long arc. Now, here is the detail in this announcement that I honestly think is the most important one, and it is sitting right there in Stephen Binder's quote, and I don't think enough people have pulled on it yet. TV Line reported that the showrunner, when asked about Tony's turn and what role he might play, said they were considering a number of options for the new director, and specifically added, now if we can find a way to have a director who's also really involved in the cases somehow, that might be interesting. I want every NCIS fan to read that sentence again. A director who is also really involved in the cases somehow. Not a politician. not an administrator, not someone who sits behind the glass on the 6th floor and delivers briefings. A director who is still in the field. A director who cannot stay in the office. Which is, of course, the only version of Tony Dinozzo that could possibly exist in a position of institutional authority. Tony has never in his entire career been a man who managed from a safe distance. He is a man who is already at the crime scene before anyone called him. He is a man whose instincts work better when his feet are moving than when he is sitting still. And if the show is looking for a director who stays involved in the cases, a way to solve the vacancy left by Vance's death, while also keeping the energy of the bullpen alive rather than funneling it upstairs into press briefings and congressional meetings, then Tony Dinozzo as director is not just an interesting idea. It is the most compelling answer to the director question this show has ever had available to it. Think about what that dynamic would look like on screen, and I honestly think your brain starts running in 17 directions at once. Tony as director means Parker is suddenly reporting to someone who is his genuine peer as a field agent, rather than a politician who outranks him. Parker and Tony in the same room having a conversation about a case. Two men who have both been shaped by Gibbs in different decades and different ways, both understanding the job at an instinctual level that transcends the procedural, that is appointment television from the first episode it appears in. McGee, who has been the institutional memory of this team for 23 seasons, suddenly navigating a relationship with a man who was his senior field agent, when McGee was a probie who still flinched when doors slammed. Torres, who has never worked directly with Tony and has only ever known him through the stories McGee tells on quiet nights when the case has hit a wall, finally meeting the legend in person and probably being deeply unimpressed for about 45 minutes before Tony does something that completely changes his mind. Casey and Palmer working for someone who remembers this building the way it used to smell and sound and feel before any of them arrived. That is not just a casting announcement. That is a complete and total reshuffling of every single power dynamic in the NCIS building, and the story possibilities that come out of that reshuffling could fuel an entire season without any additional external threat at all. And then there is the question of the specific situation Tony is walking back into. Season 23 ended on one of the most loaded cliffhangers this show has produced in years. Torres in a dark alley, Mateo Garcia with a gun and a single gunshot before the screen went black. Showrunner Binder has confirmed nobody died in that shooting, but he's been careful not to say more than that. So season 24 opens with the aftermath of that alley scene still unresolved. And whatever Tony's role in season 24 turns out to be, he is walking into a team that is carrying the weight of all of that simultaneously. The director vacancy, the alley shooting, Mateo's connection to something far larger than anyone has fully mapped, LaRoche still circling power, and McGee carrying a revelation about his son that changed everything about what his personal life looks like. Tony Dinozzo, who has always been at his best when the people around him needed someone to cut through the noise and focus on the thing that actually matters, is arriving at exactly the right moment. And I honestly think that timing is deliberate. Now, let's talk about Ziva, because this is the question that is generating more comment volume than anything else connected to this announcement and deserves a real answer rather than just a shrug. CBS declined to comment when Deadline asked directly about Cote de Pablo's involvement. And I want to be precise about what that means. It is not a no. A no would have been easy to give. At this time, we have nothing to announce about additional cast returns is a sentence that takes 5 seconds to say and closes the conversation. CBS choosing not to say it means the Ziva situation is either more complicated than a simple confirmation allows, or the answer is yes, and they are simply not ready to announce it yet. What we know for certain is that Tony and Ziva ended with the two of them together in Paris, with Tali building the life the original series spent a decade making you want for them. And if Tony is now walking back into NCIS headquarters for an entire season-long arc, the question of what Ziva is doing while he is gone, whether she is in Paris, whether she knows where he is, whether she eventually comes through those doors herself, is a question this show is going to have to answer in some form. It cannot simply pretend that storyline does not exist. And the fact that CBS is not saying no to Cote de Pablo is the most interesting thing anyone has said about this announcement in the last 48 hours. And I need to zoom out and talk about the full picture of what this week means for the NCIS franchise, because I think it is genuinely historic, and I do not think that word is too large for what just happened. On June 30th, Mark Harmon returning to Origins for every episode of Season 3. On July 2nd, Michael Weatherly returning to NCIS Season 24 for a season-long arc. And this fall, NCIS New York premiering in the slot directly after the mothership on Tuesday nights, starring LL Cool J as Sam Hanna. 3 different expressions of this franchise running simultaneously, all deeply rooted in the original people who built it. CBS went into the summer of 2026 with a show that had just lost its director, ended on a gunshot cliffhanger, and was heading into its 24th season on the reputation it had built, rather than the immediate momentum of a blockbuster finale. And it is emerging from that summer with Gibbs on one show and Tony on another, and a brand new spin-off anchored by one of the franchise's most beloved recurring characters, all on the same network, all on the same night. That is not a coincidence. That is a network that looked at what it has and made an aggressive, confident, long game decision about how to use it. And I honestly think it is the right decision. For those who want to catch up before fall, every season of NCIS is streaming on Paramount Plus right now. NCIS Season 24 premieres this fall on CBS, Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. New episodes will stream on Paramount Plus the following day. And based on CBS's usual fall rollout, expect the premiere sometime in late September or early October 2026. Tawny Denozzo said, "I'll see you in the fall." And I honestly think fall cannot get here fast enough. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Tony is walking into that director's chair? And do you think Cote de Pablo shows up before Season 24 is over? Because I think the answer to both of those questions is yes. And I think Tuesday nights on CBS this fall are about to feel like something this franchise has not made any of us feel in a very long time.